Hello and welcome, everybody. It is a pleasure to have you all join us on World Snake Day. So we are joined by myself, Michael Starkey, founder and executive director of Save the Snakes, and Hiro Naik, who is a Save the Snakes communications coordinator. So we will both be leading this presentation today. It should expect to be about an hour, maybe 45 minutes for a presentation. But what we want to do is be able to answer all of your questions on World Snake Day. So whether that's about snake conservation efforts, human-snake conflict mitigation, snakebite issues around the world, or even just a little bit about snake ecology, natural history. So we're really excited, and we're going to get started right now. So how about we go ahead and just give ourselves a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. As Michael mentioned already, I'm Hiro Naik, the Save the Snakes communications coordinator. Some of you joining us may have already might know me from our various social media platforms. And it's fantastic to be here and to be able to share with you some of our snake conservation efforts across the globe.
And my name, like I said, Michael Starkey, founder and executive director of Save the Snakes. And yeah, so since 2017, Save the Snakes has been supporting international snake conservation programs around the world. And we're so excited to be able to hold our first interactive webinar for you all today on World Snake Day. So to get started, I'm going to give a presentation about this topic of bridging the gap between human-snake conflict and snake conservation. And we feel that this is a subject that is not fully addressed because there is this great kind of distance between these two subjects. And we're going to explore this juxtaposition. And to get started, we have to learn a little bit about snakes. And so snakes are critically important animals for this world. They are necessary for maintaining balance in the food web. They are a natural form of pest control. So because snakes provide humans an ecological service, we think that snakes deserve our respect. I know many of us on the call already appreciate snakes, but it's important to remember that the mass, portions of our society do not actually appreciate these animals. However, we see across the world that snakes are actually worshipped and celebrated in different cultures and communities. My favorite story is in the Aboriginal communities in Australia. They have a creation story about the world serpent, this large rainbow serpent, which created the rivers, the valleys, the mountains and streams. Just this wonderful story that's been depicted in art. Quite wonderful to think about. However, the majority, again, of how snakes are treated, and if we think about other creation stories, for example, snakes in the Bible, or just snakes in popular culture, if we think about Hollywood movies and how snakes are portrayed, they're usually pretty, depicted poorly. And so this fear and misunderstanding of snakes can actually become greatly exacerbated. And we see this at rattlesnake roundups in the United States, where thousands of snakes are slaughtered every year. Like in this photo here of a rattlesnake roundup in Sweetwater, Texas. And so this fear has created this justification for killing these animals. And we want to look at this and try and understand how these can happen, because we do think that most other animals, it's difficult to kind of make that justification. So let's explore this further. But fear of snakes is deeply ingrained in society. So whether, if you see a snake in popular culture, again, it's going to look angry, it's going to look, upset. And so I like to share this photo of a Western diamondback rattlesnake. It's, to me, I think a quintessential image of what a dangerous snake looks like. But really, people that understand snakes understand this is a snake that is threatened, it is fearing for its own life, and it's doing everything in its power to defend itself. And so it's important that we change this perception of what this image looks like versus to what it really is. And so snakes around the world are actually threatened in many different ways. And just like other wildlife species, they suffer so many different threats. So from habitat destruction, infectious diseases like snake fungal disease, pollution, pesticides, climate change, overharvesting, invasive species, the list goes on. But one factor that's a threat to snakes is this persecution. So people that are actively going out of their way to hurt or harm these animals. And just to give you an example of that, in 2007, a group of scientists were studying how people were interacting with wildlife on roads, and they did happen to see that snakes were actually targeted. So about 3% of drivers on this stretch of road in Canada would purposely go out of their way to run over a snake. So the scientists used obviously a replica animal, so they weren't killing lots of real snakes, but it just goes to show you that people will go out of their way to actually hurt these animals. And so this level of persecution kind of, it makes it difficult to save these animals, because it's true that we cannot actively pursue snake conservation efforts for threatened species if we have communities that are not on board or can't even accept to save snakes. And again, pretty simply, snakes aren't the most attractive animals. They're not charismatic megafauna like lions and tigers, elephants. Big, beautiful animals typically kind of take up the limelight. But you could make an argument that species like or tigers and also elephants are also human wildlife conflict species, and they do kill people every single year. But again, they are just so much more seen as attractive animals that are worth being saved. Snakes don't necessarily have that. So as an uncharismatic species, snakes are going to face greater conservation challenges. And so in my background, I worked with the giant garter snake, which is a species of Thamnophis in the Central Valley of California. This species is a big brown and green snake that most people will never see, but it's becoming highly threatened from urban development and habitat loss. And so if we're going to save species that are uncharismatic, we got to really redefine our efforts and think about different ways that we can get people on board. Because again, we must have community support to save snakes. And it's also really important to know that the conservation needs of snakes are poorly understood. So the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, released a report in 2012 that said 12% of assessed snake species are threatened. So that's threatened and endangered. However, that's during a time when most of the reptile species have yet to even be assessed. So we're still learning so little. We know so little about these animals that it's difficult to determine what snakes actually need conservation efforts versus what do not. And so scientists and herpetologists, we have to try our hardest to understand what these snake species need to actually address their conservation. And then to tack all of this together, snakes being uncharismatic, we don't know about their conservation issues. We have this big problem with human-snake conflict, and it's increasing globally. Because as humans go out into wild areas, they're interacting with wildlife and coming into contact with more snakes. And each year, over 2.7 million people suffer a serious snakebite envenomation. So they've been bitten, they've been envenomated, and they need to get help fast. And even more alarming is that around 125,000 people die and up to 400,000 people are permanently disabled. Now, these numbers are not actually accurate. These are based off of hospital records. So when people get bit, they actually go to a place where that number is recorded. Probably this number is much higher because there are many people who don't have access to a hospital. It's too far away, or they actually just don't make it to the hospital in time, so they're not recorded. So it's really important that these numbers might be on the low end, which is even more alarming to think about that this many people are dying or becoming disabled each year. And of course, this is unfortunately a problem in most of the majority world. And so the majority world, that term is for people who live on less than $10 a day. And so we see in places that have high snake diversity, have high tropical biodiversity, or even more so parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, Central America, India. These places have many venomous snake species. People live in close contact with these animals, and they don't have the means to get help when they do suffer a snakebite envenomation. And so all of this together is why the World Health Organization declared snakebite a neglected tropical disease in 2017. Because there's so little attention being paid to human-snake conflict and snakebite that they wanted to raise more awareness for this problem and to create more action. Now, when people don't necessarily have the tools or training or maybe the proper information about dealing with snakes, it kind of leaves them with little hope and little resources about what to do. And so for many, the solution is just to kill snakes, because any snake that could come in your home or near your livestock could potentially end your life or, hurt your family. And so snakes are oftentimes killed indiscriminately. And so we see this around the world, from across the globe. Where snakes are, people indiscriminately kill snakes. However, this is not a sustainable form of snake bite mitigation, because attempting to kill a snake oftentimes increases your chance of being bitten. So if you can imagine, if you've been bitten by a snake, you're stressed out, and then trying to kill it, to either take it to the hospital, can actually increase your chance of being bitten again. So it's really important that you leave the snake alone if you are bitten. However, we do recognize that hospitals need to know what snake has been bitten you, so you get the proper treatment. But this is an area where there's this problem that we're seeing, that when people attempt to kill snakes, they increase their chance of being bitten. And so for threatened species of snakes, if people are going around and killing snakes indiscriminately, it's already become another pressure that's going to drive snakes closer to extinction. And for this reason, this is why we see a gap between the conservation needs of snakes and the solutions for human-snake conflict. And so these have to be working together if we're going to start seeing snake populations that are being protected and conserved, and also that snakebite deaths globally are decreasing. We have to find that gap and close it. And so Save the Snakes is working to do this in various ways. But again, we were established in 2017 to protect threatened snake populations around the world through habitat preservation, education, and to create a harmonious relationship between humans and snakes. And we do that in these ways. First, we identify and empower snake conservationists. We are so fortunate to be able to create this network of people who are working around snake issues. And luckily, they found us and we found them, and we're able to support their work. So we support their community-based snake conservation or snakebite mitigation efforts. So working grassroots level on the ground, working mostly on prevention of snakebite and prevention of these human-snake conflict issues. And then we elevate their work on a global platform, on our social media pages and on our website. And on days like today, World Snake Day, which is a great day to celebrate snakes and raise awareness for their conservation. And so to execute these things, we actually do it in 4 steps. So Save the Snakes and our conservation partners follow these 4 steps to reduce human-snake conflict and increase threatened snake populations. And so first is building the capacity of local communities. And that looks basically pretty simple. It's talking to people. It's giving programs like presentations, whether that's online webinars in this post-COVID world, or before and hopefully again in the future, in-person meetings at community centers, at libraries and town halls, wherever people can gather to get this information, we're out there to give it. And so what that looks like is the ecological importance of snakes. So telling people, hey, this is why snakes are important. So very importantly, teaching them about the identification of venomous versus non-venomous snakes. Many snakes are actually good snakes to have around. While we think all snakes are important, I think some people might be more inclined to have, a non-venomous species near the home than a venomous species. And then just simple precautionary measures to avoid snake bites. And then very important, first aid and treatment in the event of a snake bite. And then lastly, our conservation partners work with the communities to discover sustainable solutions to live in harmony with snakes. And we'll go over some of those measures. And then secondly, after we have this general education of kind of snake bite awareness, and we go forward to actually directly mitigating human-snake conflict. And that looks like, again, finding these solutions for people that are living with snakes and that have snakes in their area. So these mitigation measures that could, basically minimize a negative interaction with the snake. And so very simple things. Again, it's wearing proper footwear at night, mosquito nets while sleeping, carrying a light or a torch when you're walking at night to avoid stepping on a snake. And then probably most importantly is promoting these simple changes to land use management. So removing vegetation, cleaning up areas around the home, making sure that there's no rats entering the home or rodents, so that we avoid creating habitat for snakes, preventing snakes from being attracted to things, because we want to keep snakes away. And the simple way to avoid a negative snake interaction is to not see a snake on your property. And thirdly, we strengthen community-based conservation of snakes. So Save the Snakes supports many programs around the world, but just to highlight a couple, in Zambia, Ken Waterhouse and his team at Helping Hands in Snake Safety, they have been training snake rescuers in rural Zambia in professional snake handling techniques. They hold these trainings that can actually keep snake rescuers safer by giving them proper tools and the proper training. And so because in places like Zambia, where the nearest hospital might be very far away, the nearest clinic, it's really important to have people that can have as much snake prevention as possible, because a snake bite can be a very, very deadly circumstance because help can be so far away. So by training snake rescuers in professional snake handling techniques, they can mitigate that conflict directly. And then secondly, in Nepal, our conservation partner, Kamal Devkota, and his organization have been basically working to train people in Western Nepal on snakebite, first aid, snake awareness, that are actually teachers themselves. And so they're teachers, they're social workers, they're people in these communities in Western Nepal that are going out and already giving important information. And so they just added a little bit more to their curriculum in snakebite awareness, snakebite first aid, and snake awareness. And so by training teachers and social workers, you've basically distributed that information so much further than if it was just one individual giving the information. And so lastly, with all these things combined, we work to foster support for snake conservation. And so we live in a world now that's actually becoming ready to save snakes. And so, because if you think about it, maybe 20 years ago, the idea of snake conservation was just probably something not really looked fondly upon. I think our world was just getting ready to the idea of, you know, wildlife conservation as a whole. And now we have people that are interested in snakes. They are fascinated by their ecology, or for many people that actually might keep a snake at home, they greatly enjoy these animals or enjoy seeing them in the wild. And so they're ready to support snakes. And so what we can do is take the work of our conservation partners and our Save the Snakes programs and actually put it out to the world so that it can inspire others to have their own efforts, but also just to allow people to kind of find that space within themselves to appreciate these animals. And so when Save the Snakes was founded, very quickly we started getting calls for support from around the world. And so we initiated the Save the Snakes Support Grants Program. And so this grants program is aimed to support small projects from either individuals or NGOs that are just getting started. It's meant to seed a program. In our first year, we received 15 proposals from 9 countries, so which was quite surprising. We weren't expecting so many proposals. And we were able to fund only 3 because of our limited funds available. The next year, we had 37 proposals received from 19 countries. And so we quickly realized that there's so much of a need for support out there. And Save the Snakes is working to be able to fund as many projects as possible. But again, that limited amount of capacity on our own end unfortunately prevents us from supporting all these very worthy projects. So I just want to highlight a couple programs that we've supported though. In 2018, we supported Patrick Kenyatta Malonza in Kenya to reduce human snake conflict in his area of Kenya. And he produced these incredible posters that went out to community centers and schools, educating people about the differences between the venomous and non-venomous snakes in the area. And then he went around teaching teachers and others, again, about this information so that information could be distributed far and wide throughout Kenya. So very proud of his work. And then secondly, another project we were able to support in 2018 was actually a very targeted snake conservation campaign. So we were able to support Julian Rojas Morales to actually work to save the Hostos forest racer snake, which is only known from, well, previously only known from 1 specimen in Colombia in 1 forest reserve. And this species was lost to science. It was presumed extinct and rediscovered after 70 years. And so Julian and his team found this snake, and they worked with communities around this preserve to say, hey, if you see any snakes, don't kill them, because it could be this highly endangered species of snake. And so now we very fortunate we were able to support this project and this community education work. And so now Julian and his team are looking to preserve more habitat for the snake, understand where the snake is. Very cool snake conservation project we're very fortunate to support. And so now I'd like to switch gears on a project that Save the Snakes is proud to be able to showcase today. And I'll give the floor to Hero.
So thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. I'm very excited to be here and to be able to share with you some exciting projects that we will be implementing in South Africa. Now, when people think of snakes in South Africa, they immediately think of black mambas and Mozambique spitting cobras. But really, of the approximately 117 snake species in South Africa, less than about 15% are considered to be very dangerous or have caused any harm to humans. And these include things like puff adders, various species of cobras, various mambas, rinkhouse, and boomslang, just to name a few. And most snakes encountered by people are often non-venomous snakes, you know, unless you are in areas where venomous snakes are really abundant, often rural areas. And so often snakes that are killed will be non-venomous snakes. And this is largely due to the fear of all snakes. And having been involved with Save the Snakes' education efforts on the social media platforms, it just felt like the timing was a bit right to focus a bit more locally and to educate and work with communities that encounter snakes often within South Africa. Next slide. So I am very excited to announce that representing Save the Snakes in South Africa, we have formed a partnership with the Hoedspruit Reptile Center. Now, some of you may be familiar with the center, which has previously gone by the name of Swadini Reptile Center back in 1984 when it was first formed. And it has undergone other names such as Kamai Reptile Center, Kinyanga Reptile Center, and now Hoedspruit Reptile Center. So the center has been under new ownership and management since December 2019. And with this new management comes new perspective. And really that's where this specific partnership will be fitting in. And this will be important because it'll be the first of many collaborations for the center with both conservation and research bodies, as well as for Save the Snakes within Hoedspruit. And really the goal of the Reptile Center is to conserve reptiles and amphibians both within South Africa and worldwide by teaching people about the importance in nature, and to just felt like they were the people to form a partnership with. So together, the goal of this partnership is to mitigate human-snake conflict within the greater Hoedspruit area. And Hoedspruit is a small little town within the Limpopo province of South Africa. It falls within the northeastern region of the country. The little green arrow on that small little map will show you. This map really. Sorry about that. I got kicked off because of the internet. My apologies.
You're back.
As I was saying, the Hoedspruit area within Limpopo is very diverse in terms of snakes and reptiles in general, but very limited. We have very limited knowledge about snakes in South Africa in general, but particularly in this area. And Hoedspruit itself has two of the most common snakes featured in snakebite. puff adder, and Mozambique spitting cobra. So really this partnership and our projects that we will be implementing will be a first in the era of the center and really save the snakes as well, as we hope to understand a lot more about snakes and snakebite within South Africa. Next slide. I'm also very, very excited to announce that I have received a grant from the International Herpetological Symposium, and this is to begin our efforts in Hoedspruit and within the Hoedspruit area. This specific project will look at mitigating human-snake conflict within the Hoedspruit area through educating learners and community members about snakes and snakebite. And this will be done through developing educational material that is interesting and novel, but also, most importantly, communicated in a way that the diversity of cultures of people that live in Hoedspruit will be able to understand. So within the next year, we will be visiting schools and engaging with the learners to ensure that there's ongoing mentoring. And hopefully at the end of next year, we'll have an exhibition where the learners will showcase some of the things that they have learned. Other projects that we will look at implementing within communities. If we can train at least one or two individuals from the community about how to safely relocate snakes in the future, when they encounter snakes, instead of killing them, they will be successfully and relocated. We also hope to educate healthcare workers and local clinics and hospitals about snakebite and snakebite management. Often in places like Africa, healthcare workers in rural areas don't know how to identify snakes, don't know how to identify snake bites itself. And so snake bite victims are not treated appropriately. So hopefully by educating them, we will contribute to minimizing the number of snake bite related deaths. An overarching goal of this entire project initiative will be to conduct local scale research on the snakes in the area. And understanding more about their behavior and their ecology, and really how this fits in with the interactions with humans within the area, within the larger province, the larger area of the province as well. This will not only allow us to understand why people are getting bitten, but it will also allow us to create better science-based education material for individuals within the region, as well as South Africa. So we really hope that this multifaceted approach will become a benchmark and a blueprint for other areas within South Africa that face similar challenges. And we hope that this model can grow in the other parts of Africa. And this project will be an ever expanding project. And so we're really looking forward to working on mitigating human-snake conflict.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harold. Really looking forward to seeing this project grow, and it's very cool that Save the Snakes is going to be able to kind of have some work in South Africa. Thank you so much. And so just to kind of round this out too, if you have any questions about this aspect of the presentation, we're just going to speak a little bit more on a few more slides, and then we can answer those questions about Harold's work in South Africa. And I want to leave you with some important information on World Snake Day about how you can save the snakes. And so there's many things that people can do in their own communities to help snakes and to actually basically save them. So first, become a snake saver yourself. And so that can be in many different ways, whether you clean up some snake habitat or you stop to rescue a snake on a road. But one thing I wanted to point out from the beginning of this presentation of that same 2000 study in Canada, that 3% of drivers were actually running over snakes. They also found that 3% of drivers were rescuing snakes that they found on the roads. And so it does show you that you know, we kind of have this competing force of people that are going to be for snake conservation and maybe some that against. But as you are all attending this webinar, you know, go out into your own communities and be that 3% of the people that works to make the world, you know, more friendlier for snakes. And so you can, again, make your community snake safe in different ways. And so whether that's advocating to your neighbors or community members about why snakes are important, or just giving your neighbors some helpful tips about, you know, how to avoid a snake bite, and make sure that your community knows where to receive care. And so, and the right care as well. It's really important we're giving the correct information. And so there's many resources on SaveTheSnakes.org, including snake bite guides about how to, you know, avoid a snake bite in different languages, but we're always looking to produce more. And so if you speak a language other than English, it would be great to speak to you if we could convert some of our guides into your language, because there's so many people around the world that need this information in their own language. And so it'd be great to work together to produce more dynamic snake education materials. And then lastly, everything that Save the Snakes does is based on the generosity of donors. And so people that care about snakes, or they are concerned for their communities, or want to make a difference for human-snake conflict or snakebite issues. And so putting on this webinar, even, you know, it costs money to do that. Save the Snakes has no paid staff whatsoever. It's a totally volunteer-run organization. And so if you could donate as little as possible or as much as possible, we greatly appreciate that. And so a little hog nose that looks really cute, telling you it'd be great if you could be our Serpentine Valentine. And so with that, just want to kind of conclude the presentation side. Snakes are important, and we preach this, that we want to save them together, because it really is, it's a community effort. And so, and we are all a community on this planet and working together for snake conservation. And so on World Snake Day, we've been exploring this gap between snake conservation and human-snake conflict mitigation efforts. Today, we launched this beautiful work of art in collaboration with artist Zoe Keller. So what we did is created this piece of art that's highlighting snakes that are commonly found within human-snake conflict situations. And so from left to right, we have 5 species. So we have the common crate, the black mamba, the king cobra, the western diamondback rattlesnake, and the fertilance or terciopelo. All 5 of these species have their own issues about how they're a human-snake conflict species, but currently only the king cobra is a threatened species. And so if we see human-snake conflict continue as it is, and that this indiscriminate killing of snakes, this persecution of snakes, other species may become threatened. And so that's why with more education and community outreach, we believe we can close this gap in communities around the world. And so go to our website, learn more about Save the Snakes, check out this beautiful poster, just highlighting snakes and the work that Save the Snakes is doing and our conservation partners are doing. And thank you so much. And so now I'm gonna see if we can turn on our video, stop this screen share, and then we are going to give some questions and answers, because I'm sure there must be many questions after this presentation.
So we have one question here. It is by an anonymous attendee, and the question is, what is the best way to help snakes in my local area? So anonymous, unfortunately, we do not know where you stay, but Michael will hopefully give you kind of a general idea on what to do to help snakes in your local area.
So it can be, so there's a few general things to think about with your own region and what snakes they are, because every snake is actually going to have its own conservation issues, but some things are more general. And so for us, we think that working with the people in our immediate vicinity that are closest to us, whether as our family, our friends, our neighbors, to be more appreciative of snakes, or to understand that snakes don't need to be killed, that's a great way to help snakes. And so just for an example, I'm calling from Sacramento, California. In Northern California, we have a venomous rattlesnake species, the Northern Pacific rattlesnake. And through our programs here, just these education programs, we've gotten people, you know, just by telling them why they're important and then giving them a solution about how they can basically, whether it's, you know, clean up their property so that snakes aren't coming on, or who to call in case they do find a rattlesnake. They found that they don't have to kill the snake, but in turn, they can actually, let that snake be, or they can call someone. So they were given basically a solution when that snake came onto their area. And so we find if we provide these mitigation solutions that people are more inclined to let snakes live versus that need to having to kill them themselves. So talking with your community members and being kind of a force for snake conservation can really help the snakes in your area.
Alrighty. Next question. Snakes play an important role in our ecosystem by maintaining a balance to the food web. Are there any other important roles of snakes in nature next to this?
It's a great question. Harold, do you have anything you want to say about that?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest things is that snakes are a great form of pest control. And while that is an important point on maintaining balance to the food web, I think one of the biggest factors is the fact that, as rat and mice communities in urban locations start to increase, snakes play an absolute vital role in the form of pest control.
That's right. And so I think in the ecosystems themselves, snakes are just important because they're both predators, obviously eating rats and other animals and controlling, wildlife populations, but they're also prey, right? So they're fed on by many things. Snakes are not the highest, they're not the apex predator on the food chain. We may have more questions about this, but, snakes are just important for a variety of different reasons. But for themselves, probably this just being this, species that matters so much in the food web is so important. But to humans, snakes are incredibly important animals for many different reasons. So again, a natural form of pest control is so critically important. But then also snake venom saves lives. And so one species we've been highlighting frequently is the black mamba. And scientists are studying black mamba venom to actually look at how it can repair, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's diseases. And so snake venom is kind of similar to like plants in the rainforest and around the world where, they might have this hidden cure. And scientists are just starting to scratch the surface about how venom can save lives. So another reason that snakes can help people.
Cool, thank you. Next question. Recently, a vet student was bitten by a monocled cobra in the capital of Brazil, and a huge web of wildlife trafficking was discovered. Do you think that educational programs on the subject to mitigate such problems are more efficient when given to children or adults and undergraduates?
That is a great question. And so it's, I am actually, I'll be very honest that I'm not 100% sure about what studies have been done about human behavior studies. But it's my understanding, and Harold, maybe you can also talk to this, is that, when we educate children, it's usually much more receptive, the information, and it's also a little bit more successful because when children have this early education about a topic, they typically carry it throughout their lives. And they can also kind of educate their parents as well. Because I think everyone attending this call can recognize is that as we get older, we become set in our ways. We're maybe less likely to be open to new information. And so it is sort of our understanding that, educating children is critically important, but it really is important to make sure that information is available to everyone.
Great stuff. Next question is by Abhilash Ravi Mohanan. I hope I said that right. What are the infectious diseases affecting snakes? Oh, great question.
I'll highlight a big one is that snake fungal disease is it's a skin disease that has been impacting snakes in the United States. And now it's actually been discovered in Europe. I don't believe its origin is unknown. And if there's anyone on the call that is more familiar with snake fungal disease, I welcome that information. But that's a big one because it's highly contagious. It seems to be spread through wild populations as well as within the pet trade in Europe and the United States and in captive animals. And so we got to make sure that we look at this disease seriously because, with other infectious diseases in other species like white nose syndrome in bats, and other, rhinovirus and chytridiomycosis in amphibians. Wildlife diseases can really wipe out populations of animals very, very quickly and kind of secretly before scientists can learn about it. And so we want to make sure that we're studying this as much as possible. And I will highlight later today, there's going to be a webinar that we'll share on our Twitter and probably I think we shared it on our Facebook page as well, about what the Department of Defense Partners in Reptile Amphibian Conservation Group is doing to mitigate snake fungal disease on basically military bases on federal lands in the United States and abroad. So highly recommend checking that out to see what scientists are doing to mitigate that disease.
And Abhilash, Stephen Allain, who is one of the Save the Snakes Advisory Committee members, is actually working on snake fungal disease. He is on this call, but you're welcome to check out our website to get his details. And I promise you, he will give you an exceptional little detail about that. Okay, next question. Are you aware of any guidelines, recommendations for when and or where to implement different types of human-snake conflict mitigation actions? For example, situations where creating a physical barrier to keeping snakes out of an area is preferred versus situations where encouraging coexistence is preferred.
That is a great question. So when we say guidelines, I mean, there's a lot of groups out there that have produced independently their own, guidelines about how to mitigate human-snake conflict. And luckily there's so many organizations out there that have done it. And so there's a good chance that in your area, there has someone that has published something. So I'm thinking of like Indian snakes in India, which has a rescue network of over 25,000 people that on their website, indiansnakes.org, has so many information about how to mitigate human-snake conflict. I'm also thinking about these snake rescuers in Australia and some herpetologists that have produced some materials. But the only kind of like official guidelines about mitigating snake bite in particular is through the World Health Organization. If you look up their snake bite basically mitigation plan, they do have established guidelines that are basically accepted by scientists around the world. However, it's because snake bite and human-snake conflict is kind of this wheel of a problem where it's, how people live in close proximity to snakes, they're bitten by a snake, they may not be able to get health care that they need, and then it's a health issue, it's a social issue, it's a snake, ecology issue, it's all these things combined. The guidelines they don't have as much information on the prevention side of things. And so wherever you are in the world, it's critical to look at the species that are in your area and understanding how that conflict is occurring. And so I would recommend finding a group that's local to your country or region that has already defined guidelines about that. And if you send us a message at contact@savethesnakes.org, we can connect you with a group that hopefully we can, that's working in that area.
Cool, thank you. Question here by Shane Rampertab. I have been requested by a mining company to conduct snake handling and removal training for their employees, but I did not feel well prepared since I've never had a proper training, just what I picked up from working with visiting herpetologists. So are there any plans to do any sort of training courses in South American countries like Guyana?
Well, we would very much love to travel to Guyana and come hang out with you and go rescue and work with snakes together. That would be a lot of fun. No, I'm joking, but also kind of serious. So my understanding is that in general, there are very few courses available that teach people about handling snakes. And I can understand why, mining employees want to keep themselves themselves safe when they're working in an area where there's very many venomous snakes. I do, however, know of people in Suriname, so not too far away, that are actually basically mitigating human-snake conflict, and they may be able to, probably not now because of COVID, but they may be able to help out. That group is Herping Suriname, and that's the individual's name is Dick Locke, who founded that organization. But I can also look around to see if there's more groups. Save the Snakes is planning in the future to actually give venomous snake handling workshops. We'll be partnering with that effort with the Rattlesnake Conservancy. But because of the situation with COVID, a lot of that has been delayed.
Alrighty. Would you say you see a correlation to the amount of support you receive, like donations and external funds, with how the information is being visually communicated to the general public and donors?
That's a good question. It's a little difficult to answer it. I'm curious, Hero, if you have a thought before I come up with something.
No, but I think that would be a really great way to track it. I mean, I don't think a lot of organizations have done it, but you know, besides the donations option on Facebook and people running birthday fundraisers, I don't think there's another way that we can kind of have a visual communication way that we can, you know, showcase that correlation.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And so I know like larger wildlife conservation organizations that have much bigger budgets than Save the Snakes, they do track this information. You know, where is money coming from? How is it coming? But again, we don't have paid staff currently. We would like to in the future, because the more we build up our capacity as an organization, the better prepared we'll be able to do this important work. And so while we're looking at that, that's a separate issue, but we target our supporters in different ways to donate, but it really is just the charity of people that they learn about us on the website. They might have had a personal interaction with the snake and they felt compelled to donate. We don't ask too often for money. There's only a few times a year we'll actually ask people for funds. World Snake Day is a good example of that, where we're trying to raise some money to offset costs for these webinars and raise some funds for our future support grants. But yeah, that's a great question that we're going to be looking into more.
Cool. Justin Bernstein. I'm a researcher studying the evolutionary biology of snakes. Although I discover and describe biodiversity, I'd like to be more involved with snake conservation. Are there ways to do this through Save the Snakes, despite not doing strict ecological work?
Yeah, there is. And so again, I would send an email of interest to contact@savethesnakes.org, but we are always looking for people that are skilled in certain areas to join our advisory committee, because Save the Snakes is able to function because we have many people that donate their time and energy and that can actually consult us on various matters. And so, for example, I'm not in South Africa and I don't know South African snake issues. So we have people like Hero that are involved with these issues that we can rely on, so that as an organization, we can make these decisions. And so I would say if there's a particular area you work in that you think you could contribute, then that helps out as well. General ways that people can support is they can actually hold fundraising events for Save the Snakes. That really helps us when people do that. And then there's a lot of nonprofit management type things that maybe a little bit less fun, but that's the way that Save the Snakes operates and maintains our organization. So in those ways currently, those are kind of where we like to see people help out. Again, we've been really limited with what has happened with COVID, because everything is now online. And so we're shifting our strategy from mostly holding in-person events to more of a digital type environment. And so if you know a little bit about that, we'd love that help as well. But send us an email and then we can discuss it further.
Okay, next one. In the case of snakes found in a home's yard, is relocation effective in deterring that snake from returning? In our area, we deal mostly with Western diamondbacks. Great.
So that is a great question, and I'm really happy that we'll be able to touch on that. This might be a little controversial, but relocating snakes, if it is not done with, I guess, care and a little bit of thinking about like where the snake is being relocated, many snakes actually die. And so there's a few reasons that this happens. And so it's important to understand that snakes, regardless of the species, actually have a home range. And so some snakes have bigger home ranges than others. Probably a Western diamondback doesn't have the largest home range, but they know where their winter hibernacula is, so where they go to retreat in the wintertime. They know where their water sources are, their best places to find food. And when we take snakes out of their home range, scientists have discovered that they don't do very well. And so I like to think of it as if you plop me in the middle of the Amazon rainforest and I don't have a smartphone, and I'm, going to quickly have a hard time trying to survive as well because I don't know where anything is. And so scientists that have worked on translocation of snakes, so the releasing of one snake to a new area, they find that snakes, they really become stressed, and they try and get back to where they originally came from. And during that time, they can be exposed, they can be predated on by natural predators or, unnatural predators like cars or humans, where, they get run over as they cross a road. And so scientists, through this information and what we've learned as an organization, we think that snakes should be relocated as far as the landowner will let them, basically, because some landowners will not tolerate a snake on their property, and so that snake actually has to go, and so it has more of a chance for surviving than living on the property. But this is why we preach a coexistence with snakes and learning about snakes, because if we can make the areas where we live appropriate for humans and not snakes, so creating barriers that don't allow snakes to come in, reduce those attractants to snakes like rodents and water sources, we can keep snakes outside of our properties that are relatively close, within a few hundred meters. So just because we do see that more and more, that when people remove snakes, even like a few kilometers away, they don't do very well. And so obviously we want to look at this question more, but this is what we're seeing. And again, if you send an email to contact@savethesnakes.org, I can send you an entire, basically, library on papers on the subject.
Great. Next up, I'm a bilingual undergraduate living in the Central Valley of California, and I'm surrounded by orchids and orchards and grassy fields. If I'm concerned with the reputation colubrids have here in general, how do I go about educating the public on why apistoglyphous snakes aren't a threat to them?
Again, another really great question. And coming from Sacramento, who's also in the Central Valley, I can understand that. Because, there's like this saying, and I think mostly in the United States, so it's probably around the world too, any good snake is a dead snake. And so whether it's a California king snake, a non-venomous gopher snake, these snakes oftentimes get the blunt end of a shovel because they don't, it's human perception again. And so it is baby steps though. And so again, so if you're advocating for snakes, it's important to say, okay, well, here's the difference between a rattlesnake, which might be in the area, or just the colubrids, or find out, what's important to an individual that may be more aggressive towards snakes. So some of the ways that when we're kind of like in these human to human conflict situations between talking about snake conservation, we try and find out, it's like, well, why are you afraid of snakes? Like, what is it about the animals? And you usually find that it's for really selfless reasons. People want to protect their livestock. They want to protect their family or their pets. And so by understanding that, you can say like, okay, well, like a non-venomous snake is not going to bother, your animals. And actually they're going to help you in these ways. And so using this technique of, having these really positive and kind of proactive conversations, you can kind of get people to come on your side that might be a little bit more hostile, because we also don't know the situations that people have been through. And as snakebite is a very common thing around the world, someone may have lost a family member or suffered a traumatic event from a snake. And so using these techniques to talk to people one-on-one, we found to be quite important. And so, usually these kind of gatherings and talking to people in these ways are the best way. Now, it may not be so easy now, but it's a stepping stone.
Great. Has there been any work using culture as a basis for conservation of snakes in any areas?
Hero, any? So I have a few that come to mind, but do you have any that you might want to touch on?
No, not necessarily. We're hoping to learn a lot more with some of the work that we want to do in South Africa.
Yeah. So just one great example that I was thinking of was that in the Western Ghats of India, there's the Agumbe Rainforest Reserve, Rainforest Research Reserve. Oops, I screwed up the name. Sorry, guys. So that group has been studying king cobras in the Western Ghats for a long time. And I think people who are not from India or South Asia might, might agree with this, or maybe not. But so I think, like, in the United States, like when I talk about programs in India, and I often hear this, like, well, don't they worship them there? And so anyone from India would probably be like, no, they don't worship snakes. And but actually, this one community in the Western Ghats does. So snakes are sort of revered as a sacred symbol. And so this is kind of an example of where the community at Agumbe, the snake rescuers at Agumbe, have reached out to their communities, because those communities don't actually want to kill snakes. They, like, if they find a king cobra, they don't want to kill it. And so that's been a very positive way that people have, the rescuers have been able to help this community, because they already didn't want to kill the snake, but they just don't want it in their yard. And so it is that deep cultural tie to snakes that they've been able to, actually save them versus killing them. So unfortunately, this is not the case everywhere. And I do want to point out, I'm seeing that, so David Wadnowski, board member of Save the Snakes, is chiming in that he's done some work in Kenya, and they did account to take in the culture of the area. And he might chime in a little bit more. Yeah, so sometimes it is practical, but not always.
Great stuff. Next question. Any tips on first aid for snake bites? I'm sure there's lots.
Yeah. Oh man, where to begin? I'm trying to think if it might be easier just to link you to the World Health Organization and what they recommend, because unfortunately there's a lot of bad information out there. Like sometimes in the United States we hear that if you're bitten by a venomous snake, you need to suck on the wound and spit out the venom, or you need to cut your veins so the venom bleeds out. Not to be so graphic, but it's true, and like none of that works, and you can actually hurt yourself more. In Kenya, actually, I was on a different webinar today. I heard about a treatment for snake bite called the black stone, which I believe is charcoal. Harold, do you know about the black stone?
No, this was the first time I heard about it, and I guess it's quite common.
Yeah. So this, I guess, in Kenya and other parts of Africa, I've learned as well that the black stone is this. You rub it on the wound, and that's supposed to, heal the snake bite, which it can't. But so, and David, thank you for chiming in. So if anyone, I think, can see on the chat, I highly recommend checking out the information that David is referring to in the chat. Yeah. So, but for guidelines that are sort of set in stone and, universally recognized, please see the World Health Organization on snakebite. Get to a hospital, get to medical treatment. Antivenom is the only thing that can save lives.
Cool. Delilah has a good question. What is a good way to help snakes in countries where snakes are uncommon or rare?
It is a good question. So again, it's still, even though snakes are rare, it can be very helpful just to have community engagement. And one thing that's nice in that way is that, you can kind of highlight these animals that are maybe secretive, because snakes already have this kind of, you know, whether it's a stigma or this mysterious nature about them. And so you can kind of, if the snake is rare, you can actually use it as an opportunity to get people interested or a little curious about them. And so again, I think just trying to drum up some, you know, educational materials and, you know, and just talking about the snakes. So I'm thinking about some areas where, like in the UK and in the Netherlands, where they have, you know, a venomous pit viper, the adder, which is, you know, is becoming quite rare itself. And it's only usually found in like these protected areas. And conservationists in these countries have done a great job at getting people to really celebrate their adder, their one venomous snake. And I'm sure there's many other examples. And Hero, if you have some, please feel free.
I see on Facebook, Matej Dolanay has said that as far as I have learned in several African countries and one Czech guy who claimed to save the life of a child with it, the black stone is a fossilized bone.
Oh. Thanks, Mate. Appreciate it. Thanks for chiming in.
Okay, so Rohan asks, what is the best technique in a venomous snake bite? So I think here again, the World Health Organization is probably a good place to look out for details.
Yeah, but we can also just, for the sake of this call, just so that everyone has this information, if you are bitten by a venomous snake, it obviously depends where you are, right? Because if you're out hiking in the woods kilometers away from your vehicle or help, you may need to do things differently than, you know, if you're just bitten, you know, in your neighborhood. But the general rule is that you need to seek medical help as soon as possible. And so wherever you're bitten, and depending on the species, sometimes you might need to do different things. I hope I don't have some African snakebite people get mad at me for saying this stuff. But you want to keep the limb immobilized as much as possible. So no tourniquet. So we're not, you know, cutting off blood supply. But if you're bitten, let's say on your hand, you know, tying a sling or using your shirt just to immobilize and keep that, you know, close to your body. And then as quickly as possible, get to a hospital, remaining calm as much as possible. So having someone else help you get there is also important. The more energy that you're putting out, the walking, running, panicking, you're going to be, you know, getting that blood moving in your body, thus actually getting the venom to move a little quicker. So the idea is by remaining calm and keeping that bite area mobilized, you will actually kind of give yourself a little bit more time. But the most important thing is, again, get to a hospital as soon as possible. A quick thing too, so neurotoxic bites, so like from mambas, cobras, and, you know, other, you know, elapids, you're going to have different symptoms than hemotoxic bites, you know, from venomous pit vipers. So it's important to understand as much as possible what snake bit you. So taking a photo of the snake is also very important. I think most of us in the world, you know, usually have a phone that has a camera on it. And if you don't, being able to identify the snake is very, very important. You know, in simple things, was it long and black? Was it, you know, fat with a triangular head? You know, those can really help doctors to determine what snake bit you, because they're going to need that information for when you get to the hospital and deciding what antivenom to give you.
Great. Francis Tenorio from Philippines. I have a project idea about snakes found in the Philippines, starting with snakes found in major cities and those species which are commonly persecuted in rural areas. What is the first approach to jumpstart this project? I'm quite hesitant to do this on my own since I'm still a student.
Well, it's wonderful that you actually have a project that you want to do. So I commend you for that. And it's really neat to see these projects taking place across the world. And so I think if you're curious about starting your own project, I would visit Save the Snakes and look at our conservation page and look at the programs that we've already supported and learn. Basically, you can use them as a template because there's a lot of information on each of these projects about what they did and how they were successful and some of the challenges that were there. But another great way is, you know, so look at your project. How is it going to help your community? How is it going to help snakes? And then you're going to want to look into, ways that you can drum up a proposal. And so, because that proposal is going to be used to fundraise for your project through grants and other ways. And so, again, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, because it can be a little overwhelming sometimes, like definitely have that feeling running an organization. But there's so many examples out there. So from Save the Snakes, you can learn. But another really great organization that funds projects in their beginning stages is the Rufford Small Grants Foundation. And I highly recommend looking at their website, because you don't want to actually just look at snake conservation projects. Look at all types of conservation projects, because we shouldn't reinvent the wheel, and we should see what's successful, and what might work for snakes probably has worked for other species. And so taking those information from other projects will help your own project to make sure that it's successful.
Great. This is Oscar from Rwanda, and he asks, I want to ask, how can someone get funded to train, handle both venomous and non-venomous snakes in Rwanda? He's working as a herpetologist in Rwanda.
Yeah, and so it's, again, if you're not doing the work yourself and seeking outside help in your country, it might be a little bit difficult finding people to do that. But we know quite a few people now in Rwanda working on snake issues. So if you send us an email, we might be able to get you more information about that. If you're looking to start your own project, that would be a perfect example of the Save the Snakes support grant. So I encourage you to go to our grants webpage and to look about how you can actually apply for funding that way.
Great. Now this next one, I don't know if he's asking why or what. Why or what spectacled cobras eat other venomous and non-venomous snakes?
It is my understanding that cobras eat other snakes, and I believe the spectacled cobra does. I could be mistaken though. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm like concerned if I'm wrong. I know spectacled cobras eat a variety of species, and so we've in India, when we were there, we observed them definitely eating rodents, but they've been observed eating birds. I'm pretty sure they eat other snakes as well. And so spectacled cobras are kind of they're active predators that go and try and grab anything that they can. And oftentimes you find them entering cities, and so because they're attracted to rats. So I'll actually have to look up myself to see, what snakes they do eat. And if there's any spectacled cobra experts on the call, I'd appreciate if you could chime in and chat. Please, we welcome your advice.
Cool. Next up, are snake carriers of diseases? Not as far as I know. That's actually another really nice question too, because if I think everyone remembers when COVID, coronavirus was kind of going around the world, and people were trying to pinpoint the source, and they were looking at these wet markets in China, and there was this initial claim that it was snakes. Like snakes were the animal that caused it, from people eating snakes, and that's what the coronavirus, how it started. And then it jumped to pangolins, and then it's bats, and it's kind of gone all over the place. But that it turned out the snakes, that was not true. And so it's really like snakes can't actually give diseases to people, despite the snake bite being a neglected tropical disease. It's not actually a disease, right? But really it's just, if anyone handles a snake, so like a non-venomous species that, like a boa constrictor or a python, it is important to wash your hands just in general, because all animals do carry some little bit of salmonella. So it's important that, you wash your hands after handling reptiles. But no major diseases that I know of have jumped from snakes to humans. This is Sebastian from Colombia. He says, hello from Colombia. Here we are fortunate to have lots of biodiversity, which makes it extremely difficult to teach people in the countryside to learn the differences between venomous and non-venomous snakes. Because every rule here has an exception, and we risk to get too taxonomical. We also usually face adults or elders with really strong opinions against snakes. What advice can you give to be more effective in spreading this knowledge about snakes for me and my fellow herpetologists in Colombia?
Yeah, that can be tough. And I'm especially thinking of all these viper species in South America that look very similar. And, you have so many because you have such wonderful diversity in your country. It can be tough to make a guide that is like simple and easy for people to understand. And so it kind of, the way that I would approach that is really coming at it from a, just taking a big step back and again, looking at, okay, what are maybe the most common species that are encountered by people, like on their plantations or farms or in their homes, and what do people already know? And so, for example, if they may think that non-venomous species are also, venomous as well, is it like, okay, so does the community have a basic understanding about what are venomous and what's not? And then using that as an area to start your program, because it's really important first to understand why are people so upset, and it's in areas where people are, do suffer from snake bite. If you've had someone in your community die of a snake bite, it's kind of like no tolerance, and so. So the same techniques of like, maybe with kids having a non-venomous snake to, bring it and showing them why these snakes are wonderful, that's not going to work to maybe some people who are older and more set in their ways. And so their concerns are going to be probably about keeping themselves, their family, their pets, their livestock safe. And so giving them the tools that they are empowered to do that. So again, that's like keeping snakes away, so for example, if there's, a Bothrop species that's attracted to rats, that's a very great way to say like, okay, this is why the snakes are coming, and so use the snake's ecology to be the way that people keep them away. So if we avoid the rats, so those preventative measures like that, so if we avoid the rats, it will keep snakes away. And so it's less about the ID of the snake, and then more about just snakes in general. It's like, why are snakes coming? That's probably the way that I would say to go about it, just because in our programs in Northern California, it's people who are very set in their ways. They don't care about snakes helping people. They just want to make sure no snakes are on their property that can hurt their family. And so if we respect that concern, we're able to have a more productive conversation. So understanding where people are coming from, why they want to keep snakes away. And also, people are going to kill snakes. Unfortunately, like I love these animals so much, but I recognize, and our organization recognize, people kill snakes, and that's going to continue to happen. And if we're going to be a positive force in our communities, we have to come at them with compassion and say, like, I totally understand the reason why you did this. So let's find other ways that we can keep you safe, so you don't have to kill these animals. And so preventing the snakes from getting close to your family or your livestock is going to be the best way. And so as herpetologists, sometimes we want to jump on, the IDs and the why snakes are important, or just kind of talk about the snakes themselves. But people, they don't care about that when there's that real danger to them. Kind of a long answer. But again, if you send me an email at contact@savethesnakes.org, I can actually give you some more descriptive ways about how we can mitigate that conflict.
Cool. What are the best strategies to make local people friendly with snakes by avoiding snake fairness?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
What are the best strategies to make local people friendly with snakes by avoiding snake fairness?
So I guess that would be very similar to, again, having, reaching out to communities with some sort of information, whether that's in printed materials or an online presentation or a PowerPoint presentation, just with information that's relevant to the community. And so again, coming at the community with addressing their concerns about why the conflict is there, how to prevent it, and then finding out what's the best information that they're going to want to hear. So in Colombia, it sounded like these people don't care about why the snakes are important. It's more about, preventing the conflict. That might be useful in that situation. Where in a different area, it may be a different reason, like snakes save lives and through their venom. So you'll have to find out this information yourself about what's important to who you're speaking to. And again, I highly recommend reaching out to a group local to you, because there are so many wonderful organizations and individuals out there that are working on snake conservation issues that can provide more insight. And again, reach out to Save the Snakes and we can connect you with people.
How can we deal with snakes found in a bedroom where they quickly disappear somewhere inside if disturbed?
Hiro, how would you handle that situation? Oh,
tricky one, eh?
Yeah. So what came to mind though, as I was thinking about Nick Evans and Cormac,
yeah.
who, you know, they have these videos of them. I highly recommend you, if you're on social media, to search some of these groups in South Africa that are individuals in South Africa who work with mambas, because I'm thinking of this particular one of Nick Evans, who's this incredible snake rescuer and just able to handle these snakes, so it seems effortlessly. But particularly in a bedroom, and if you can imagine, you know, a 3-meter-long black mamba inside of a bedroom, you know, that may even be longer than the room itself, how difficult that can be. And that's a situation where that might be really difficult for you as a person to deal with, or a family member to deal with. And so that's why we always recommend that, you know, don't put yourself in danger, don't encourage your family to put themselves in danger, but to find a snake rescuer, find someone that is professionally trained that can remove the snake. That would be kind of like option number one. Option number two, if they're not available, eventually that snake will move and it will leave. And so if you are able to overcome your fear, you can slowly start removing items from the room so that the snake does not have anything to hide behind. And then you can use a broom or a mop or something with a lot of distance to help the snake leave the room. Because again, we have to recognize that there may not be someone that can come rescue the snakes, and we might have to deal with these situations on our own. But when snakes are cornered, they're going to feel like they have to defend themselves. And so getting the snake to leave the room and allowing it to, you know, make sure there's a clear area that it can exit, that will help in that situation.
Cool.
And so I'll mention from Arcadia Perez, you know, has a great suggestion, and he says, or she apologized, in my experience, moving things out to clear walls and returning when the snake is not tucked in a corner helps very much. So yeah, so making sure the snakes have like a wall to go across, that will help. So make sure there's no clothing or anything that snakes can hide that's blocking their way. Definitely will be useful.
In rural, this one's from Chucky. In rural communities with inadequate or no healthcare options after snake bite, how would you recommend encouraging people to not kill snakes indiscriminately?
That's a great question, and it's one we hear a lot, because again, the idea of leaving venomous snakes be is sometimes not possible. Like people can't. They're like, no, I can't leave this dangerous animal where it is. And so respecting that is really important. But if people do have that space to see kind of an option, you know, we really recommend not killing the snakes, because again, people become so much more in danger of being bitten again, or just being bitten when they try to kill that snake. So in rural areas where, you know, a snake is a very potentially dangerous animal, if there's no help, the closer you get to that snake is the closer you get to being bitten. And so if people can leave the snake so that it can leave the area on its own, but just watch it from a safe distance, that way you know the snake has left the area. Because something we didn't talk very much in the presentation is that it's important to understand that even if a snake is killed, there's a really good chance another snake is going to come and take its place. Because the likelihood that one person is going to wipe out all the snakes in your area is unlikely. It could happen theoretically if everyone's killing snakes. But the idea is that if there's rats or a water source or some reason the snake is coming back to that area, if you kill that one snake, there's a good chance you'll have to kill another one and another one. And this idea is that you're increasing your chances of being bitten because of these snakes you're killing, versus leaving the snake, watching it, and allowing it to leave the area on its own. It actually allows that snake to kind of be like, oh, I don't want to be here. There's these humans that are potentially going to hurt me too. So it gives snakes to sort of learn that it's maybe not a good place.
Yeah, and I think it's also very important when it comes to education to really talk about snakes and their behavior. You know, a lot of snakes have families, you know, trying to express the importance of that. Just typical behaviors that snakes exhibit that you don't necessarily find with other animals, and why it's important. You'll be surprised to find that, you know, when people can find something to connect with any kind of animal, they'll be a lot more hesitant to kill it the next time they see it.
Exactly.
Okay, I can't answer this one. Are monetary donations to Save the Snakes tax deductible in the United States?
And yes, they are. Save the Snakes is a 501c3 organization. So that means that in our country, the USA, donations are tax deductible. Thank you for your support.
Okay, we've got two more now. Are tourniquets useful at all in venomous snake bites, especially in hemotoxic snake envenomation?
So I would want to refer that question to someone that has more experience, like working with snake bite. So that has seen snake bites up close and has maybe treated them. So a professional that's working in that. It's my initial understanding that tourniquets do more harm than good. And the recommendation to have a tourniquet has hurt more people, because they do them so tightly that even if it was a hemotoxic venom or a neurotoxic venom, if the tourniquet would have helped, it didn't help more than the blood loss to the arm, or if that makes sense. And so it seems that tourniquets do more harm than good, and therefore are not recommended. Harold, does that match things that you've been hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So, and then again, I would invite, if anyone works with, snake bite, to chime in on that issue in the chat. And we'll also look into that a little bit more, but it just really seems that they do more harm than good.
Right. Cool. You may have already covered this, but what are some examples of snake species, subspecies conservation success stories? Ending off on a good note.
That is, I think, a great question to end this wonderful question and answer session, because luckily there are many wonderful conservation success stories. And so Save the Snakes is currently supporting programs that are sort of in like their infancy, so they're young. And so we're very curious to see what will happen in 5-10 years. But there are these really wonderful stories of where conservationists have stepped in to actually save an endangered snake species. So again, to the great people at Agumbe, they have been working in their community for a few decades, I believe, working with them so that no one feels like they need to kill a king cobra anymore, which is a threatened species. They can call the snake rescuers at Agumbe, and then they save the snake. And actually this goes for kraits and cobras, non-venomous species like rat snakes and trinket snakes. All snakes within an 80 kilometer radius are actually being saved. And it's through the tireless education and community outreach efforts of Agumbe, and so their programs. There's also a couple really interesting examples of snakes on islands. And so one in particular, the St. Lucian racer down in the Caribbean, this species was basically wiped out from persecution, non-native rats and cats and dogs and things. And so Durrell Zoo and some local conservation organizations got together. They began breeding the snake. So this is an example of ex situ conservation. So, breeding the snake in captivity, and they did releases. And this snake almost became extinct, but now I believe there's over 1,000 individuals back out in the wild. And so that really took place because, you had a lot of community engagement. People became passionate about this snake. that was endemic to their island and that they wanted to save it, and they allowed these kind of conservationists to help out. Very, very cool success story. All right. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. I want to just kind of say again, thank you so much for attending this webinar. We've had such a wonderful time being able to share this information with you. And we look forward to having more of these webinars. And so if you can, please go to our website, subscribe to our newsletter. And if you can, donate a little bit so that we can have these in the future. And Hero, you want to say any closing thoughts?
We're really looking forward to starting up some snake conservation work in South Africa. So, and I mean, as you know, funds towards Africa are always limited. So if you're interested, let me know. I think my details are on our website as well. And yeah, if you want to help, if you want to fund, we're happy to collaborate.
And I'm just putting those emails in the, so for Hero, her email is hero@savethesnakes.org, and mine is starkey@savethesnakes.org, or contact@savethesnakes.org. If you donate, just please mention going to Hero's project in South Africa, and we can get that going. All right, everyone, please go on social media, share this presentation, come back for more in the future, but go online and look at all the wonderful things that are happening around the world on World Snake Day. There's a lot of incredible online events and positive snake education out there. So from all of us at Save the Snakes, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, bye.